Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to day 4 Array Festival, Digital Tech and Innovation in the City region of Lancaster. What a week. What a week it's been. And I'm sure you've all enjoyed tuning in with some of the video that we've had so far. Some great interviews. Mike Gibson yesterday, James Walker the day before. Lots of conversation about low carbon innovation, lots of conversation about digital and tech. Great day on Elect Tech on Monday as well. And we're finding some real good crystallization of all the fantastic stuff that's going on in the city region. So what have we got today? The final day. We're going to kick off in a moment with the Lancaster Climate Emergency Network. How can your business support and address the climate emergency? We've got 2 fantastic speakers, experts in leadership development, team development, work with some of the biggest organisations in tech in the world, Nick Gannicliffe and Jonathan Stevens. And so, and then later on today, this morning, we've got a discussion with Martin Peters, who is from Morales Data, talking to Kerry Harrison of Lancaster Skills Partnership around diversity and inclusion in the workspace. And then this afternoon we've got a number of small businesses from across the region all coming in to deliver what we're calling Lancaster Lightning Talks, which is short 5-minute presentations about some of the great innovation that's taking place right around the city region, not just in digital tech and innovation, but also really interested in this important subject of social innovation and how people are being supported from all walks of life to be able to innovate, to be able to start businesses and to be able to do fantastic things right across the city region. So I'm going to say a quick thank you finally, to our headline sponsors, Fraser House, Lancaster City Council and ICS Accounting. And again, once again, the ICS team will be in the networking rooms throughout the day. But now, I think we're ready. This is a real interactive session today. Guys, I'm just going to check in. Are we ready? Team in the background, are we ready to pass over to...
Less time for the breakout.
Are we ready to pass over? Great. We're going to head over now then to Nick and Jonathan, who are going to introduce this morning's session to you. Nick, Jonathan, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, Dan, thank you. Good morning, folks. First time that I've been involved in something like this, in sort of the excitement of live TV and seeing everything running around. I've seen it from the other side, so I've really enjoyed what's been happening in the last few days in sort of like the journey of the Array Festival. And Jonathan and myself, we're here for the next, whatever it is, hour and a half or something, sort of just to accompany you on this journey. I'm going to sort of set us up and tell you a little bit about the flow and the purpose in a second. But I thought I'd just start with one of the sessions I've really enjoyed the other day was Innovate. And Jonathan and I yesterday, over in Staveley, we were sitting right outside the Innovate shop. I'm a big fan. We both own, I think, several pairs of shoes, too many, perhaps of that. And we were sitting and talking about innovation and everything along this. And I was talking about a program I'd seen with Jaguar cars, the E-Type Jaguar, a really beautiful, beautiful piece of innovation. And we were just talking about that. And right in front of us drives brand new Jaguar I-Pace, which is like top of the range electric vehicle. And in terms of innovation, it's just like 2 brilliant pieces of innovation right in front of us at that very moment. Back in the 1960s, Jaguar had a really nice tagline, which was about pace, space, and grace. And what I hope today is that Jonathan and I are going to bring a bit of that. So there's a bit of pace. We got quite a bit to do. We're not going to solve the whole climate emergency in this session, but we're going to keep things moving on with some conversations. Space. We'd like to think we're going to hold a space for you to have some really good conversations. And grace from the fact that I would like to think you're going to listen to other people and their fantastic ideas. We have got an enormous wealth of talent all around Lancaster, but especially right in this session today. People in here and people in Fraser House right now. And I'd like to think we can make use of that. So indulge yourselves, take some time out in this, put your emails, phones to one side, and we're going to invite you to have a couple of really good conversations. We have got, in a minute, Jonathan's going to introduce Mark Davis, we hope. People are making various signals. Whoa, great. From Lancaster City Council to give us his perspective of sort of the challenges that he faces from the council. We are then we're going to put you in smaller groups and going to ask you to ask a sort of fundamental question of how do we respond to the climate emergency? We being perhaps in your own company, Fraser House, or as a wider community, society, how do we respond? We're going to get your best ideas. And then after that, we're also going to give you, I hope, some pointers towards the best way of using Teams to actually try to solve some of these issues. So there's a bit of sort of an input coming from Jonathan and I later as well. Hopefully you'll get to meet perhaps some people you haven't met before. Let's see, I know it's quite a close community in some ways, but hopefully a chance to just network and say hello, find out something about some other people. That's about it for me now, I think, Jonathan.
Great, well done, Nick, thank you. Good morning, everybody. I'm Jonathan. Delighted to welcome Mark Davis, Director of Communities and Environment, back to the stage. Mark, can you hear me okay? The tech works. Mark, lovely you're back here again. Just remind us, tell us why this is so important from the perspective of Lancaster City Council.
I think from one of Lancaster City Council's main priorities is addressing climate change, both in terms of on our own estate. So as a business, we produce lots of sort of CO2, but also in terms of the council's role as a sort of anchor institution in the area, as a community leader, the need to sort of influence businesses, residents, visitors, etc., in a way that we take account of our environment and that we obviously address the immediate emergencies, but that we develop and build the district in a sustainable way.
Can you tell us a little bit about your journey as a council? What's that been like?
Well, I mean, it's one of those where, as a council, we declared a climate change emergency. So our politicians did that, and my role as an officer is to sort of convert that sort of policy into sort of practical steps. So the first step was assessing what our baseline was of CO2 emissions from our sort of direct operations. We worked that out and it came to 3,018 tons of CO2 per year, which is a figure. But then you look at that relatively. In Lancaster as a whole in 2018-19, there was 750,000 tons of CO2 produced from right across the district. So we are but 0.4% of emissions. So the first thing I thought was, well, that's sort of a marginal gain, isn't it? But then you start to think about it, and the mind boggles. But I was reminded of Sidney Smith, was a clergyman, critic, philosopher, and he said it's the greatest of all mistakes to do nothing because you can only do a little. So rather than worrying too much about the impact we make, it's about what practical steps do we take to, first of all, reduce our own CO2 emissions and then sort of tackle the wider issues.
But clearly, there's something there about leadership, isn't there? Getting a little bit of feedback about leadership and perhaps taking the first step. And what are some of the challenges that you think you've had to deal with that might inform the advice you give to other organisations who are embarking on this journey, who might be a bit daunted about what it will entail for their business?
I think the first challenge is actually establishing what your impact as a business is on the climate. So, we spent about probably 6 to 12 months just working out what our sort of baseline CO2 emissions were, because the risk is that if you just sort of knee-jerk react to things and do sort of token things, that you spend a lot of money and don't have a big impact. So that's the sort of first step, find a way of establishing what your CO2 emissions are. And there is lots of advice, there's lots of practical things that you can do, and we will be more than happy to help with that. Second step is to develop a plan, because lots of the changes, particularly, the big hitters are things like our refuse collection vehicles. We've got 25 of those. Each of those produce about 1% of our CO2 emissions. To change initially from diesel to electric, there's a big upfront. The capital costs are significantly more expensive, but then you've got to look at the sort of whole life costs of that. So there's considerable investment to be made. But what we found is that by having a plan, we planned ahead to sort of 2030 initially, and getting a sort of pipeline of projects ready. There are some government funds, not enough, and not in a sort of sustained way is the government sort of investing in it, but we have been able to pick off some funds. So we've got a £6.8 million grant from the government to change our leisure centre to effectively decarbonise our leisure centre, and we can only do that by having a plan in place.
Now that came up as a case study yesterday during the interview with Henrik, didn't it? I think in Vecua. Tell me a bit more about how you've engaged colleagues within the council behind this, because I guess getting people engaged, people on board, people enthusiastic is a big part of this process, isn't it?
It absolutely is, and it's sort of something that we don't want to look at climate change as a sort of standalone policy area. It's something that needs to be sort of embedded into every thought that the council has, into sort of every service that the council has, into every strategy that the council has. And and the greatest asset in terms of delivering that are our people, because not everybody is an expert in climate change, but most of us can observe things like destructive weather events, floods, etc., deforestation, extinction of species, overdevelopment, pollution, all those kind of things. Everybody can observe that. Nobody sees that as desirable. So it's about how do we work together to sort of address that and provide a better future for not just our residents but ourselves and our families. So people can relate to that. People can relate to the benefits of having cleaner air. Everybody wants cleaner air. People can relate to the fact that things like insulation reduce your heating and energy bills. People can relate to the fact that if homes are sort of running efficiently but well heated, that reduces sort of conditions, illnesses, etc. So people have a better quality of life. So it's looking at those sort of co-benefits gets everybody on board.
So that's key, isn't it? Actually personalising it, demystifying it, I guess, is part of that process. We've only got a couple of minutes left, Mark, but what are you, as a main sponsor of this event, what are you perhaps hoping for or expecting from people in other organisations who've dialed in today? What's the council looking to see happen, and what could you offer by way of long-term support?
I think, again, this idea of if everybody does a little, we've got a much more of a chance of getting there. I'm quite fascinated by things like canals. So in the Netherlands had an existential problem in the 1860s. So they built a drainage network, which apparently is the equivalent of 33 Suez canals. So the drainage network, 40 feet deep, 200 feet wide, and 5,000 miles long. Is what they did to address their existential crisis, and they dug it all by hand. So every single spadeful of soil contributed to it. So even if we can't do a lot, if all of us do a little, we will get there. Otherwise, we just sort of accept the inevitable and we're defeated. So that's hopefully by events like this start. The people who've got the enthusiasm, the people who've got the skills, the people who've got the influence. Yeah. If we all work together, we will get there.
It's the defining issue of our time, isn't it? And I've heard people talk about if we could bring the same level of effort, focus, collective commitment that we've all done around the vaccine rollout, for instance, and I could apply some of that mentality, that thinking, that sense of shared endeavour, what a difference we might make. But Mark, any final words? Anything you'd like to share with us?
No, I think the main thing from my point of view is, we haven't got the answers individually, but collectively, we all have the answers, and I really look forward to hearing what people have got to say.
Great. Well, thanks for joining us today. Hope to see you a bit later on. Mark Davis.
Thank you.
Nick.
Well, back to the question. Huge thanks, Jonathan, and to Mark for the contribution there. We want to pick up on that. Excuse me. We want to give you a chance to get into the conversation instead of looking at it from the outside. We're going to bring you into breakout rooms and ask you to have a conversation about this question. What can we do to respond to the climate emergency? And when we talk about we, that might be we as in your own organization, in your own team, or it might be we as in a community. You might be thinking, well, okay, I'm a freelancer, but I work here, Fraser House. What's the we? What could we be doing in here? And what can we be doing in society to make this sort of to come alive and actually do something? We're going to ask you to join the ICS breakout room in a minute, and there Dan will work his magic and actually split people up. A great part of this really is we want to form a greater community. So please take some time, say hello, introduce yourself, what you do, where you are, where you work if you're not working here at Fraser House. Just we're forming this community and getting people to actually mix through this week, and I want to continue with that. Couple of ground rules. Make sure you hear from everybody. You might have maybe 6 people maximum in the breakout room. Please make sure everybody's got a voice. Somebody's a bit quieter, invite them in, listen. We may have time to actually come back to you and actually perhaps build up on some of the things you've said. It will really help if you actually just nominate a speaker. So rather than everybody sitting there rather awkwardly waiting who's going to speak in the group, just nominate amongst yourself. If we're going to come back to you, Jonathan's going to do that later, then decide who it is who's going to sort of speak on your behalf. And what we're looking for this. We're looking for your 3 best ideas. Now, I know you're all talented people. You're going to come out with millions of stuff. But in terms of tying it down, let's go your 3 best ideas. You might have a whole load of ideas, and you might want to see them in this context. You might want to split them up and think, right, if I was putting it on this grid, what's the impact of our solution, of this idea? What's the ease of implementation? One ease might be, we're going to stop buying straws, plastic straws. A really difficult thing to do, or a high degree of implementation, is we're going to dig a well and have geothermal heat. So think about, well, where do these ideas fit? If you can get things into easy to actually implement and have a great impact, well, absolutely brilliant. That doesn't mean you don't need to do the things that are only going to have a small outcome, because you know what? If everybody's doing small things, as Mark actually alluded to, then actually that can have a greater effect. And there may be things which are more long-term. They're difficult. They're long-term in the future. Still, you can still capture them. And what we'd like you to do is actually put them in the chat, because we'd like to present this back to Mark, and also as a record for ourselves of the sort of things that people have come up with. So put them in the chat, but in terms of us perhaps coming back to you and saying, hey, tell us about your top 3 ideas. Bear that in mind, and we're going to give you, I should have asked Jonathan to think about this, shouldn't we?
How about 15 minutes, you think?
15 minutes. Oh, you're going to have to get your brains on, get moving quickly.
Let's go for 20.
20, look at that, coming in. Managed to do some thinking. So yeah, 20 minutes. So if you could move into the ICS breakout room, Dan will do his marvellous magic and have a really good conversation. And we'll see you in 20 minutes. Thank you.
Have you all said hello?
We have done.
Well, I better say hello, hadn't I? I'm Dan. And for Murray Festival, been running this event. And Fraser House. So we consider ourselves to be an important stakeholder in the city's business community now. full of digital and tech businesses. So acting on behalf of everyone really to share the message of the climate emergency. And it's quite interesting actually. Jodie, I think you were on this call a few weeks ago. There was a chamber call and somebody asked about Fraser House car parking. My response was, car parking? Well, it's a climate emergency. We don't need cars. What? Get the buzz. So yeah, that was my thoughts. So cool. What can we do to respond to the climate emergency is the big question. Jodie, what's going on at the chamber?
Well, I can't say that we are the pioneers, and I can say that we're doing this and this and this, because I think we probably fall into the majority of businesses that we can kind of tick the little boxes of, we've got LED light bulbs and we do whatever, but there's that much other distraction, and there's not an imminent, like the comment that was made about the vaccine. The whole nation's got behind the vaccine because there's an immediate situation and an immediate payoff. Whereas this, it's kind of the bigger picture, no immediate payoff, lots of other priorities, and you just kind of do the little bits and tick the little boxes that you can, but don't really apply thoughts to the really involved, in-depth actions that you can take. So I think that's where we're at, and probably the same as a lot of other local businesses.
Yeah. Susanna, what are you seeing?
Unmute myself. I think we're within the council. We're working on a lot of different platforms. We've got 3 dedicated climate officers, and then teams of people around them, which is kind of helping to drive not only like our corporate behavior, but also like how we interface outside of the council and then planning policy. So, but we have a long way to go. So like one of the things that we're not doing yet is separated recycling. So inside of our offices. So I'm really curious, like in this space, if we can kind of discuss different things we could be doing and what that would look like, because I think all of us have a long way to go. Like even in my personal life, I've got a long way to go, and that's even more so than in business. So that's what I'm really interested in, is like those different ideas of what we could be doing and different things I think we can be doing to help encourage other people in that space. So like I try to cycle to work all the time. And so that kind of thing. Yeah.
Chris, what are you? What's happening at ICS? How would you describe the approach to climate emergency there?
Well, as Susanna said there, we've been trying to implement a cycle to work scheme here, which is something that's been really useful during the pandemic as well, when people have been able to take advantage of that. The roads have been quieter and whatnot. But something else I wanted to mention: I've got a friend that works for the county council on their roads and development. He's working on the roads and engineering on that side. And he was telling me yesterday that they're trying to push a zero carbon theme for building roads now across the county, and he specifically has been looking at asphalt and concrete supply, as he was saying, and how to recycle the asphalt and concrete when it's on the road. So he's looking at actually taking it out, taking it to reprocess, and bringing the same asphalt and concrete back in. And I just thought that was really positive way to be thinking about things. So it's good to see, on a county level, that's what we're sort of looking at.
Diane, how do you feel about hearing these things? I mean, it was really interesting to hear you speak yesterday about what you're thinking in terms of planning. But what do you think about from what you're hearing this morning?
Yeah, I mean, we're trying to do quite a lot really at the council. Like Susanna said, like Susanna works in my team, so we do work very, very closely on things. But we are kind of dealing with the planning side of things. But as she said, there's the council operation side of it as well, which Mark touched upon. And what we've tried to do is try to kind of put those two together a bit more. Because when we first kind of started doing work on this, this climate emergency work, we kind of realised that one side of the council were doing some stuff, and then we were trying to do some stuff, and we weren't necessarily aware, even just within one organisation, that we were both kind of doing similar things, and that actually we could prevent duplication, but also kind of like make things better. And it was the same with for the university, for example. We work really closely now with the university on lots of different projects that they were going off and doing research projects into things, and we were like, well, we've done this, so let's just kind of do it together. And I think there's still a massive way to go on all that. I think, there's been a lot of talk today about doing little things and that kind of getting there. And I'm not quite sure whether little is enough, to be honest. I think we need to be going a bit more than just doing, like thinking about our own recycling. And it's great, like people cycling to it and that. But I think we're maybe getting a bit past that now. Like you were saying, Geordie, about like the vaccine, and everyone's had to get behind it. I think we have to get behind this. It is an emergency. It's not called a climate emergency for nothing. The word emergency is really fundamental. And I think I really do think it's about kind of collaborative working now and coming together to actually the little things becoming bigger things by us working together, really.
I always like to go really left field on these sorts of things. So here's my suggestion. Do you think we need another Storm Desmond? Do you think we need something that's, now I don't mean the flooding, but almost like something that, like the pandemic is a moment in time that created this emergent situation. And do you know, and how do we, I'm not saying a Storm Desmond, but how do we amplify a message to say this is an emergency? It's almost like I feel like we're a little bit immune to the term climate emergency already.
I mean, maybe that's kind of like the Swedish Henrik from yesterday from Vecua. They didn't respond to an emergency. They just said, okay, this is what we're going to do. And then now their preschoolers have climate education in preschool. So it may actually be that we're like immune to the kind of violent language that we're using, like emergency or crisis, whatever. And we actually need to actually just start being really recent. Like, this is just what we do now. We're going to cycle to work. We're switching all of our electricity to renewables. Like the council has a strategic plan to have all of our electric coming from renewables. We have a corporate plan to get to carbon, like below net zero by 2030, which has taken a lot of work because we have to work with procurement and we have to work with our finance team. And that's like a cross-council project to get us to net zero. Like, it's a big, like Diane was saying, it's a huge project, but that's what we're doing now. It's not, we've got a crisis, let's like respond. It's like, it's more like we're being really strategic about it. And we've got a 10-year plan. And I think for me too, like, it's great to keep the cortisol levels down and my stress levels down. This is just what we're doing now. And they are really bold, really big moves that we're doing. And I'm super excited about that. But it is really about being excited about it. And like, how do we get to do these really big creative projects that require, like Dan was saying, like networking across the district with different people to have joined up thinking for how are we going to do this? That's like exciting. So like for me, I'm really into like, how can I be excited about this new phase of life rather than I am definitely going to be dead in 2050. But I'm so excited about networking and that joined up thinking, like, oh my gosh, it's so good. So that for me is the framework I like to work from. Is that
it's true, isn't it?
The next big project.
I think what you're kind of saying, Dan, is I think unless something really negatively affects you, like really badly, like the pandemic did to us all, you don't do anything about it, because it's like, well, that affects other people. That doesn't it's not really my issue. And I think until that kind of happens with this, people maybe not, or we go down the route that, like Susanna's saying about, well, let's excite people about it instead and affect them in that way. I think there's two ways it can be, like a real negative or real positive, but it's obviously more difficult with the positive side of it, to be honest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of, do you think as a society where incentives generate action as well, like the incentive with the you get vaccinated, we get some kind of freedom back. For businesses, especially in the climate we are, there's a lot of focus on getting back on feet, money saving. So does there need to be a balance of achieving the actions for the climate emergency, but also to businesses thinking, well, if I'm going to allocate this time and effort, then it's bad because we're talking about the climate here and the bigger picture, but as humans, we are very much, well, what's in it for me? And kind of like a toolkit.
I agree, Jodie.
Pardon?
Yeah.
Totally agree, yeah. And I'll mention something here because I bang on about this on Twitter every now and again, and it really frustrates me. If you work at the university, your bus pass works out at something like £6, £10 a month. I mean, that's bonkers. Because if we're going to do that, we should be doing that for the whole city. I'd never drive my car again. I'd be on the bus all the time.
We have looked at the council of doing a more joined up, almost like a district pass, so to speak. So you use it on the buses, on the trains. You can then get off a train and you can just get a bike and then you can cycle it and leave it somewhere. All this kind of stuff, like little kind of transport hub kind of approach, and with that kind of pass. But it's so difficult because of the different providers that Chris mentioned before, Lancashire County Council, they're the Highways Authority, so that's not us, like, as the council. We can't do stuff. And
can we lobby these people? Can we lobby these people, Diane?
Of course we do. All this work's going on. It's not that it's not happening.
No, but I know the council does. But do you need us to do you need us to take a more active to support the city council?
Yeah, I think residents, businesses, anyone, if other people start making a noise, then they may start to listen. We at the council, I don't think the council's necessarily always seen in a great light, is it? It's just like, I think if other people start to do it as well, then But all this stuff is going on. The amount of different projects that we're trying to get off the ground and we're talking to people about, there's so much going on, but it's just not necessarily getting over the finish line because, as I said, there's too many people, different stakeholders involved with different interests. And as Jodie said, each one is, well, what's in it for me? Or, for instance, Lancashire County Council, that's not necessarily our priority at the moment, so we're not going to do it. It's difficult.
This is the thing, just from sort of my experience working in accounts, if you've got businesses that are profit motivated, they may not necessarily be focused on things like, climate impact, and they're maybe trying to, shave pounds off here and there in order to save themselves money. It has to be a collective kind of, across the board understanding that, you may have to spend more in order to save more down the line.
I think that is really. I think that the thing for me is, I always think you mentioned there profit. I always think it's profit or time for me. Either I need to be cash better off or time better off. And this is because I live in Heysham, but I always work in Lancaster. Now, I drive into Lancaster rather than getting public transport, because the public transport to get from Heysham to Lancaster, the regular stuff, takes forever.
Yeah.
I drop my kids off at school. I won't be in work till 10:30.
Yeah.
And the bus pass is like £15 a week, I think now. It's £5 a day. So I agree. I'm a sole trader, but still, I'm a business owner in that sense, and I have the
capability of making that. And the other thing, sorry, for me, and perhaps need to speak to Highways on this, but Diane, Susanna, the cycling from Heysham to Lancaster is terrible.
Awful. Absolutely awful. And we're
Awful.
looking at it.
Yeah, we are.
It's so bad.
We're doing something about it.
We have, because you have to go over Morecambe, really.
Yeah.
Basically, you have to go to Morecambe and come back.
It's the worst. Or you can drive from Heysham in a nice straight line. It's a huge problem. I absolutely recognize that.
Yeah.
And that's something that our guy who does cycling, Richard Camp, and I are currently looking at county with is
there's
how
a
do we
path.
network Heysham with the rest of the
Well,
district?
just while we're on this, sorry to kind of go off track a little bit, although it is slightly on track. There is a path from the back of Mossgate.
Yeah.
It's all derelict now, but from the back of Mossgate and it comes out at Oxcliffe, at the bottom of Oxcliffe Road near Wix's, there's a path and it's overgrown. And that would be perfect because, first of all, it's right behind my house.
It goes Moxgate to where?
It's from Mossgate. It's from the Mossgate Conservation Area.
Yeah.
And it comes out at Oxcliffe, but it's at Wix's, sort of near Wix's at Oxcliffe Road. But it's all overgrown now.
Is that the one that has a gate across it?
Yeah.
Yeah. I tried to cycle that and it didn't work.
Yeah. Yeah, it just needs. I don't know. That's just one. I keep thinking. I wonder why they just don't, put a nice cycle track down there and it comes out the bottom. I mean, Oxcliffe Road's got its own problems for traffic, but yeah.
Yeah, but
anyway.
No, I think I'm really curious about is also like at the council how we can get that better feedback from people that are using the infrastructure or would like to use the infrastructure. Like, where are the problem points? Because I mean, I do a lot of cycling around, and so does Richard, and then we talk to county about these areas. But it would be great to have that kind of feedback from everyone to be like, "Oops, we've got a problem here," or this is where we're not having cycle linkages happening. And it's the same with the public transport. We've got a lot of radial movement in, but not a lot of lateral movement, which is what would make your trip from Heysham so long. Yeah.
So, I think we're coming up to the back to the stage. 3 ideas I've got. We need to think about the language a bit more. Incentives to generate action, and getting excited about. How's that sound?
Yeah.
Yeah, good.
Would anyone like to be a nominated speaker?
I'm sure Susanna would.
Oh, Susanna, I think it's great. Now, Susanna, what's going to happen? Let me tell you what's going to happen.
Where are 3 points again? That'll just get them down.
We're all going to go back into the Fraser House room now. So, how's that sound? And I think the thing is, Susanna,
yes,
we love your accent so much.
Oh, thanks.
I think it puts a bit of something extra into this. It's always nice to know that people from the outside want to come and live in our city. And,
it is.
So yeah,
I won't mention it.
Employer-led. So unless we get the employers to start being conscious of the climate emergency, the demand isn't going to be pushed through to the colleges to provide that training. So we really need to get embedded in with the employers in order to get that split.
It's definitely, as you say, Vicky. So with Tech Lancaster, we were a pilot for the national rollout of that initiative. So I think people are even listening, even to a small city such as Lancaster. And I think Boris himself made a comment about our project. So we can't, even small groups can make big changes.
Completely agree with that. I mean, you look at the Morecambe Bay curriculum; it's all, we're getting the attention for it, aren't we?
Yes. Welcome back, everybody. Love the energy and the conversations you've been having. Clearly, this is a topic that you feel very strongly about. I'm Jonathan. Good to see you all again. Can we just briefly hear back from the 2 groups? Did you get a chance to nominate a speaker for each of the breakout rooms that you were in? People are shaking their heads. Oh dear, someone might have to step forward then. Could we have someone to step forward from one of the groups? Maybe Dan, the group you were in. Anyone could just give us a sense of the conversation that you had. Your 3 best ideas is what we're looking for.
So I'm supposed to actually be doing that. So
Susanna, that's your job, is it?
Yeah, it is. I'm Susanna Dart, if I haven't introduced myself to the full group, and I'm the Climate Change Policy Officer within planning at Lancaster City Council. Great. And we had a pretty awesome conversation about different things we can do and like a focus on big action and really meeting the climate emergency. But speaking of the emergency, we were also talking about how language is used and how sometimes we can get tired of always hearing crisis language. So maybe when we're working about the climate things, that this is actually something we're going to get excited about, and how we're going to live better, and how we're going to do business better, and how we're going to work together better, how we're going to produce energy better. So it's all around like that kind of positive action and enthusiastic working together. And then we also talked about needing to have incentives and how we can incentivize making that shift and making that transition.
Great.
And that's like
Thank
within
you.
business. And then our last one was about collaboration and how we can work to collaborate across the council, across the district, across with sectors to really make sure that we have joined up thinking and that we're going at this together and not siloed. So that was
Absolutely.
our three areas.
Susanna, thank you so much. There's some great things in there, and I think you're absolutely right. This is a contact sport, isn't it? We've got to work in teams. We've got to be really thinking about the collective focus and effort. We can't do it ourselves. Thanks, Susanna. Someone from the other group, anyone like just to give us a quick sense of your 3 big ideas from the conversation?
Yeah, so I seem to have been nominated in the chat. So we had a fantastic conversation that really centered around knowledge, reputation. We identified that at the moment people are confused about what the solutions are, as well as, you also mentioned incentives. We also need those. But at the moment, we don't have the good examples. And in fact, even the opposite, heat pumps, for example, there are bad examples around. There is really good practice around the country. There are brilliant examples. We heard about one about the way you can drill holes for ground source heat pumps really easily. I know some very good examples around the country. So we've got to really ramp up the knowledge and the experience so that people aren't afraid of these things. They're clearer about the solutions. So, but we also need skills. We urgently need the people in the district trained up, experienced, knowledgeable to actually do these things. So I think there's a real role for everybody here to start to create the go-to people and places who can give really good advice, and obviously the council, the Chamber of Commerce, the college. We all need to get together and create that so that rapidly people can trust that actually these aren't wacky solutions. They're not going to cost them money. They're not going to be that difficult. And we as a council are converting our refuse trucks to electric, for example. Now, when we started doing that, we thought this is going to be expensive. But actually what other councils have said was no, because the service costs are less and because they last longer. So it's really all about knowing who to go to, who's got the experience.
Absolutely. I mean, you're talking very powerfully there about the importance of having a network of seeking out, engaging lots of different stakeholders, and I guess encouraging other businesses to get on board, either by live examples or connecting them with people who can help. And I was going to ask you all what you thought might galvanize the wider business community. What do other businesses need, you think, in terms of support or encouragement to get on to this trend towards tackling the climate emergency? Any thoughts?
I think I suppose for me it's the most obvious one is around grants, funding, incentives, to get them engaged. But as Kevin just mentioned, a lot of it is around education and having it as a priority within the business. And then we all know what's happening in the world right now. There's a lot of other priorities that are coming forward. But I think a good dose of incentives from from government with a bit of grants and funding and support and education, training amongst the workforce is going to go a long way.
I think people talked yesterday, I think it was in the conversation with Kevin and Henrik, about demystifying that, making the funding easier to understand and getting it all in one place. That's an important part of this too. Any closing thoughts before we jump onto the next session? Were you surprised in the conversations, or did you find other people having similar ideas to you?
Can I just add in some ways it's quite a simple example. I've actually got two cars, one which is older and petrol, and it's currently costing me somewhere around 20 pence for every mile, somewhere between 18 to 20 pence per mile to drive. I've also got an electric car. I'm currently driving that electric car at 1 pence per mile. And all of that cost gives me the money to actually lease a brand new electric car. So if you look at it over a year, so it's a simple example like that, and all of a sudden businesses are going, how much? But I've had to put some things in place, like charging my car between midnight and 4 o'clock in the morning. That's not a problem for most of society.
I'm just going to chuck it out there to Chris Kelly at ICS. In our breakout, I mentioned about the government obviously is very much supporting businesses, helping their employees take ownership of electric vehicles via benefit in kind. Have you had much uptake locally in the 0% BIK?
No is the answer to that. Absolutely not. No. I think that would be something that, as a firm, we would love to be getting that out to our clients. But no, it's not. It's not something that seems to be common knowledge across the bar. Grants available, the reduced benefit in kind, even the sort of cost through a business. If you buy a Tesla vehicle as an example through your business, an electric vehicle, the potential company tax saving. It isn't something that I'm seeing an awful lot of, Rich.
I know you're saying, Vicky, that obviously there's a lot of businesses still need incentives. I think there's a lot maybe we can do to push that stuff out there and get people to say, hey, look, whilst there might not be grants available, there are significant tax savings your business can make, and get in touch with folks like Chris to help them do that.
I think you're right. So thanks, Rich, and thanks, Chris, for jumping in there as well. I think absolutely. It's about changing the conversation, isn't it? It's about skills and awareness and capability, but also just changing the narrative that people have around this, so that when John comes out with that great example about the dividend for having an electric vehicle, it makes sense to people, and they understand what the benefits, the future benefits. I think Mark Davis talked a lot about that, engaging people, incentivizing that change in behavior. So thank you, everybody. Some really great ideas. But encourage you, just have a quick look at the people who were in your rooms. Stay connected. Continue this conversation beyond today. You're amongst friends. You're all thinking in the same way. Leverage that potential from these groups. Now, we asked you a little bit around what's going to help you do this, make this transition. And one way, of course, is, I think, Vicky, you alluded to this, was that sense of collective endeavor, that sense of working in teams. We're going to share with you some thinking now about how you can help your team, the team that you're part of, get on board with this process and work more collaboratively. And I think we're going to jump out of Zoom for this, aren't we? I'm going to step over to the whiteboard to do that. So stay with us.
Yeah, I think we're going to head back to stage now. So if everybody can head back to the tab mark stage, and the guys are going to do their bit there, and we'll give further instructions thereafter. We'll probably come back into the room, ICS, in a short while. But for now, if everyone head back to stage.
Great. Welcome back to the main room. So we're just going to share a couple of frameworks with you, which I think will be useful to helping you galvanize your team to tackle some of the climate emergency ideas and solutions that you've just discussed. It's a framework of high-performance team working. Some of you might be familiar with this. It's a team performance curve. It was developed by two authors and promoted in the Harvard Business Review, Katzenbach and Smith, 1993 and 2004, I think. There are two axes to consider. We've got performance impact, the difference that you will make, and we've got team working effectiveness. And you can think of the team that you're in going on a journey of evolution in terms of its team working effectiveness. A working group might be the stage you're in at the moment, where you're in the same team, but there's no real need for you to collaborate. It's more of a social or an affiliative process that you're in there. And actually, to galvanize effort, to get people aligned around the climate emergency is going to require you to get to know each other, start working more effectively. What might happen in the early stages, of course, is you get to the stage where there's a lot of infighting. Katz and Barker-Smith talk about pseudo-team. You think you're a team, but people are jockeying for position. It's not clear how you're going to work. There might be a lot of turf wars or arguments over what are the important things. It can feel quite messy, a lot of energy, but not really devoted towards working more effectively. And then the penny drops. You see the opportunity, but it feels a bit clunky. So when people are in meetings, making sure that you hear from each other, holding back, not dominating the airspace, giving people time and space to talk about things that they're concerned about. That can feel a bit awkward and uncomfortable, but it's an important part of learning how to work more effectively together. And then things start to work. You have a clear sense of your purpose. You have a clear sense of the roles and responsibilities in the team. And you're moving up the curve in terms of your performance impact and also the team working effectiveness. So that ideally, that high-performing team state is where there's a strong commitment to the people in the team. You're really clear about why you exist. It's important that you all succeed. Feedback is taken on board and people can challenge and maintain that strong relationships. And some of the things that will help you here are these elements. Having a clear sense of your common purpose, why you're here, what you're trying to achieve. Being really clear about the range of skills in the team, what people bring to the table. Having an agreed approach, and Nick's going to talk a bit more about that in a moment. That's almost the behavioural ground rules which underpin how we work together. Thinking about if we've got a code of practice in our team, we need to hold each other to account. Let's make sure we do that. But crucially, we have that strong commitment to each other so that we can collectively succeed and show up strongly with all of those external partners and stakeholders who are impacted by what we do. Nick, tell us a bit more about some of the things that will help around approach.
Well, I guess Jonathan and I have worked with a lot of teams over the years in different organisations around the world, and this sort of area is the thing that has been really helpful to people, but especially common purpose and approach. And approach is like how we do things, what's the culture, what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. And they're the sort of things that often aren't talked about, but they are there. They're there all the time. So here's a few things. Excuse me. Having a team charter, putting time and energy into deciding what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. What do we do? What do we do around here? What's okay and what's not okay? And having that as an open and transparent conversation can be pretty frightening for people. Takes a bit of courage. What's the difference between, or the balance between how much you ask people questions and how much you tell? As we get more technologically advanced or you're really sophisticated and you work at a high level of technology, there can be a gravitation towards just telling people the solution. Here's the answer. But context and the world are changing all the time. So actually, being able to ask questions, being able to listen to each other, draw people in, and actually give them a chance to make their own contribution, that's a real difference. So where's the balance? How much are we on tell? How much are we on ask? Excuse me. Piece of work I was doing some years ago, I spent about a year working with Spotify. I used to walk around the building in Stockholm in the office, and I've heard other organisations talk about this. They had these failure boards. So, big boards around the office. We're working on this, we're working on that, we're really struggling, we haven't got it right. Now, that's a great invitation for people to collaborate, to join in, to see it as they walk past and say, yeah, we've been working on that as well, we can help you. But if your culture is different, I'm working with a German sensor manufacturer at the moment, very digital, highly technical. And yet, the sense of being a German engineer, they're so proud of being competent and of being right. But the idea of saying, hey, we got something wrong is just something they really struggle with. I'm not saying you instigate that. That's about the far end of the spectrum of seeing, but it's really useful. We could have it here in Fraser House. We could have ways of saying, hey, I'd love some collaboration. You know, I'm going to stick this up, but it's exposing yourself. It's being vulnerable and saying, hey, you know what? We're struggling with this and we could really do with some help. Excuse me. Final bit. Project Aristotle was a piece of research done by Google about 6 or 7 years ago. They asked all their teams for their key criteria, what made teams at Google work. And they came out with this phrase, psychological safety, as the #1 theme. So in other words, the fact that people felt safe, people could contribute, people could be at their best. And just a fantastic way of working if you can work at that and make sure you're inviting people in. You've got to be humble to a certain extent as well. I did some work with the top team of Google UK in the MD a few years ago, and it was entirely around that, where they actually said, yeah, it's our model, and we're at the very apex of that, and actually, we don't have enough of this in our own team. So how much of that is in your team? How much can we tell the truth, as it were? Okay, so we're going to put you in breakout rooms in a minute. We're going to ask you this question. So what needs most focus for your team? What's your common purpose? Perhaps above and beyond the sort of typical KPIs, you know, about bringing this in to actually achieve some goals and ambitions around climate change. Have a conversation around the most focus for your team. And you may say, hey, but I work on my own, you know, I'm a freelancer here. But actually, you don't. I can't imagine anybody really works on their own. They'll be going into a client and immediately you're invited in. You have to work alongside them. You become part of a team. We could have that for Fraser House. I'm part of a community. What do we want as a common purpose for working at Fraser House, for instance? So we're going to put you back into, I'm going to shout to Dan here because we're very technical here. Dan, ICS.
ICS accounting room.
Fantastic. Please go back into ICS accounting room. Dan will then mix and match again. And what I'd like to think is if there's people there that you don't know, we're going to mix you up, get a chance to say hello again, have another conversation, 15 minutes. We don't need to hear an output from this, folks, because the conversations really are probably more important being in small groups. But it would be lovely if you just got a couple of things that you can talk about later that really resonate. Perhaps put them in the chat box as well, but things that resonate from this conversation.
Ooh,
okay.
Can I jump in as well?
Please do, yeah.
Kevin and Susanna, before I forget, would you mind just dropping into the chat the 3 best ideas from both of your groups? That would be marvellous. Thank you.
Thank you.
What did you think of that? What did you think of that second session there then?
I thought it was brilliant. I think the presenters are fantastic. Their style and
they're great, aren't they?
Just they engage you. It's brilliant.
They're great,
it's really good. Very impressed.
Yeah, I must admit this has all been a big, as you can imagine, it's a bit of an experiment.
Well, you're doing a fantastic job. Thumbs up so far.
Well, thank you so much. We've and just a quick, while you're both here, by the way, Vicky, Jodie, quick shout out. You've been great supporters for this event, so thank you so much for your help and your engagement as well. So,
pleasure. Anything we can do.
Good. And we'll have to have a coffee soon here at Fraser House. You'll have to come and see it.
It's been lovely. Thank you.
Good. I can see that Jonathan's come into the room and he's not got his camera on. I don't know if he's spying on us or what.
Well, I'm just a bit embarrassed about the nice things Vicky was saying about us, actually. But
all true. Very impressed.
That's very kind. Thank you. Yeah, I'm really interested to hear what you think about the teams that you're in and where they're at, I guess, in terms of the journey. And by journey, I mean in terms of team working effectiveness and their likelihood to sort of get behind this and, like you, want to do something about addressing the climate emergency in your businesses.
Chris, I think you're on mute if you're talking.
Chris is still on mute.
Susanna?
I think Chris might not be talking to us.
I think, I don't know, in terms of the team response and the power of the ability to respond, thinking of myself in place within the chamber team, I think the power lies within the smallness of our team compared to larger organisations because of that communication. So yeah, I just think that we've got power and strength in that position being a smaller team versus a larger one.
Yeah, I would echo that. I mean, within the Esther network, particularly over the last year with COVID, with everything going on Zoom, I've discovered that the most effective number of people to have on a meeting is anything up to 7.
Yeah.
Because once you start going beyond that, you have to inevitably go into a sort of a show and tell mode. But up to 7, you can have a proper in-depth conversation.
I think you're right, Michael. I think Katzenbach and Smith talked about, high-performing team, 8 people maximum, that small unit where you've got that chance to be really committed and to support and challenge each other as well. That's an important part of this process too.
And the other thing, if I can just have one more thing that I've sort of become a bit allergic to, is going to meetings with well, it depends what kind of meeting it is, but if it's a sort of creative meeting, having too much of an agenda and a structure, I find frustrating now, because if you want to be creative, if you're exploring things and how to do things, then a structure can get in the way. I mean, I'm part of a group that characterizes itself as, we do have a purpose, we just don't know what it is yet, but we will when we get there. Now, that's kind of a bit of an extreme, but you get the opposite can be frustrating.
I think the important piece there for me is that as long as everybody knows that, then that makes it okay, doesn't it? We're not clear about where we're going, but we do know this, and so we're going to work towards that until the situation becomes clearer. For me, it's an evolving process, this, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think for me as well, in particular with the common purpose, is most businesses should, I mean, some still don't, but have your strategic plan, your vision, your goals. And I think with something like this, it's good for it to come down from the top. So the board, directors, CEOs, all that type of thing need to be on board. But I know, for instance, when we do our strategic planning, we want engagement from all levels of the business. And I think if just that one person influences the plan or the goals, then you can go on new paths and start altering the thought process. And I'm hoping in particular when it comes to things like the climate emergency and new goals around that, making small inroads, I think you can really start to shape a larger plan. And then hopefully that one influence goes up and then it starts to filter all the way back down.
There's a viral video on YouTube, I don't know whether you've seen it. It's about the first follower. So there's a guy at a music festival, he's doing this really, really awful dad dancing, and everyone's sort of giving him a wide berth. But somebody then steps up and joins him. And all of a sudden, more people start to galvanize and come towards this individual until they're the main event. And it's not just about being the first person to step forward, it's about having the courage to get behind somebody and then legitimize that shift in thinking, and to start being an ambassador and to engage other people. And before you know it, you've got a movement. Any other thoughts about your teams or where they're at or what they need?
I actually work for myself, but I'm part of a European group who call themselves future strategists. But it's all about dreaming of where you want to go and then working back to see what are the practical steps to get there. But quite often the dream actually adjusts over time. And there's nothing wrong with that. No. Your initial dream may be vague, and then it gets more focused and changes. And it's actually been very liberating to be able to do that, because it means that I start to assess what's actually valuable now and getting rid of that and focusing on the things that are actually going to work.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, John. And you're talking about having a flexible approach there, aren't you? Being ready to adapt your own thinking as new information becomes available. We've got a few more minutes. Any more thoughts?
Yeah, I'm going to chip in if that's all right. I'm just going back really to what Susanna said in the first session that we had, and it kind of echoed something that Henrik said yesterday. And Henrik said, we asked him about what it was like engaging businesses back in 1996 into the VECWA strategy. And he just said, yeah, everyone just got on board with it. They just, they wanted to do it. We wanted to do it. We want to be. And I think that was the thing, and I think sometimes this is our thing, we need to, I was looking recently at the proposals to change the one-way system and reading some of the feedback on it. I was amazed. There were people like, well, where are we going to put all our cars? Where's the cars going to go? We've got thousands of cars we need to go. And I'm thinking, you don't get it, do you? You don't get it. We'll have a clean city. People will. You have to drive on the roads. We can walk on the roads, and we can dance in the roads. We can all prance up and down. We could build huge climbing frames and trees, and to me, I think it almost feels like we need something to really get behind and get excited about.
You're right.
Let's take it away from the harsh language, and let's create this vision, of an incredible city. It's like bloody Narnia.
Well, you're right. You're right to mention C.S. Lewis, because it's about telling a story, isn't it, Dan? It's about telling a really good story that is exciting and is not too hard to get your head around. And you're describing that future state and what it would feel like if you or me were there. And that's what hooks people, I think. It's a great example.
I think I just got to say on that as well, and I'd like to hear Vicky's thoughts, because, I think ultimately we look at the city council to take I do. I think the city council is who we look at to take the lead on this. You're in charge of the city. And then beneath the city council, forget the county, I think it's the city. And then, but then the stakeholders that should be sat right behind the city council should be the university, the county council, the Chamber of Commerce, LMC, EDF, those big secondary stakeholders, the NHS. And it kind of feels like maybe it's up to the city council to, and perhaps this is what you're doing through the people's jury, but this is the vision. This is it. I'll give you a quick example, and I keep, I'm not trying to blow my own trumpet here, but one of the things that we did with Lancaster on Ice, when we did Lancaster on Ice, the thing that we did, and we did it incredibly, and it was really simple, and it was a picture. It was just a picture, an artist's impression of what Lancaster on Ice would look like. And as soon as we released that picture, the city just was like, oh, it's going to be an ice rink on Dalton Square.
Yeah.
The next year, as soon as we released a picture, oh my God, they're bringing the world's biggest big wheel. So this is mental. And the city gets behind it. And it almost feels like, it needs that.
Can I know, I mean, oh, sorry, Susanna.
Oh, yeah. If I could I just wanted to pull up on what John and Dan were saying about that kind of storytelling around let's create a positive future. I think we have to be absolutely clear that it is a climate emergency. And if we don't act, we're going to have climate collapse and ecological collapse. I mean, our oceans will die. It will be almost impossible to grow food. We're going to have major water issues. So we have to be clear that that is happening, and we have to take urgent action. But it's more about, when we're communicating it and when we're living it day to day. I don't live because the ocean's going to die. I live because I'm creating a better future for myself and my future children, And like John was saying, it's creating, and Dan was saying, even with Lancaster Ice, it's about, creating a picture of actually where are we going to be living in 10, 20 years? And what is that future we want to have together? And when we stop driving as many cars, what kind of like city are we going to have? And being really excited about that. And so it's like understanding that, yes, there's climate emergency, but really focusing on that positive future that we're working together as businesses and the council and research institutions, anchor institutions, and third sector, like how we're working together to reach that positive future. And Jonathan, that storytelling is so important.
I used to know somebody who used to take kids canoeing on the River Dart down near Totnes in Devon, and there's quite a few rocks in the River Dart, that you want to avoid. And rather than say, we all need to avoid that rock over there, he'd say, let's go in that direction. And some of us have got the stomach to take on how terrible the problems are, but that doesn't mean to say that we should be shouting out to everybody else. I've just been doing a little bit of work analysing why the Bristol Pounders failed. And one of the chief reasons, there are several, but one is that the people got behind it took that sort of slightly holier than thou green attitude and started sort of shaming the business community and the people who were not getting behind it. So when it got to the point where they needed them to get behind it, guess what? They were interested. That was one of the reasons. There were several. And one of the things that I've kind of experienced in Lancaster over the last few years is we've created a narrative of working together, collaborating, cross-sector, everybody pulling together. There's a sort of general consensus that the climate emergency, addressing poverty, building stuff is what we're all behind. And the business, we're having that conversation within the business community as to how we can sort of work up a common agenda. But also businesses are in a privileged position because we don't have to lobby anything to create effective change. we can just do it as part of our business model, which is amazing. So yeah, that's what I wanted to say really. We can be very, very positive without scaring people, but be absolutely focused on what needs to be transformed.
That's a great example, Michael, and I think you're right. As soon as it gets tribal or sectarian, we're just doomed, aren't we? We've got to be inclusive. It's got to be a broad church here, for want of too many cliches. But I think there's something for me about getting your story straight and getting really good at that, telling it as well. So we've all got a good elevator pitch on what we're doing to tackle the climate emergency, why it's so important, to your point, Susanna, but what it could be like. And here are some nice examples. It's almost, because it's a bit foggy, I can't quite see 10 years ahead. I try talking to my teenage daughter about this and she just rolls her eyes. But there's something about making it accessible so that we use the same language and we start to find that other people are doing the same thing, and it's infectious then in the right way, isn't it? We've got a couple of minutes left. Any more closing thoughts?
I'm going to just jump in with another one quickly. I'm sorry, then I'll be quiet. There's an effective threefold nature to the structure, because the business community generally do things. You've got the universities, which are about education and learning and teaching, and then you've got the council, which is really about community engagement, community management of expectations, coordination at the people level. So at those three levels of thinking, community, heart and hands, head, heart and hands, there's a opportunities for quite a lot of coordination there, I think.
Great, thank you, Michael. We're going to go back to Fraser House in a moment, but before we close, if anything's particularly resonated for you from this conversation, or there's something you're going to go and do with your team, or perhaps the network that you're part of, just drop it into the chat. We'd love to see what your thinking is. I'm sure other people would be interested as well. And Susanna's put some nice things in there just now about helping get the story across. Thank you. I think we're back to Fraser House now, Dan.
Welcome back, folks. Thank you. Great conversation. Really enjoyed it. And I guess, I hope it's just one of many. I'm sure there's many going on, but we wanted to give the opportunity to bring people together in this community during this week at Array, to start that conversation and to think about perhaps in your own team, think about some of the things that we gave in terms of a tool, tools to think about your own teams and the way they work to give you really a better opportunity at reaching some of these ambitions and reaching some of these targets. So I hope, how you're feeling now about your response to the climate emergency. Maybe we've lit some fires maybe somewhere, and maybe we'll continue the conversations and you'll come across us in the future. I'm certainly hoping to come down and be here occasionally. It's just the most fabulous location in Fraser House, and I'm really looking forward to being part of that. Jonathan, anything to say?
No, great to be part of the conversation. Really excited by all of your ideas. Good luck with it, and keep in touch.
Okay, there's another session coming up, I think, with Martin and the folks at 12 o'clock. So hopefully tune in and see you around Lancaster. Bye now.
Bye-bye.